Welcome to all our wonderful friends around the world.
Good
Welcome
morning,
to High Five
everyone.
Live. Grateful to have you here. I'm Scott, and this is Angel. We're today overwhelmingly privileged to be with one of my dear and special friends. And I called the office of the 70, and they said I can call you Elder Stephen B. Allen. So there you go.
Oh.
And we will be telling you all about him. But as we do, would you please just tell us where you're viewing from, and if you have any questions, we'll try to answer those after we're done.
You can share this right while we are live if you would like.
Yep, share it with others because this is an amazing privilege. You will rarely in your life ever have the experience of being with someone who knows more about the remarkable opportunity for the gathering and preparing for all that's been happening lately than this remarkable, wonderful guest. And you'll see that as we introduce him. So let's give the introduction.
Yeah, let's tell you a few things about this amazing person that we are interviewing today and being with. And we are so grateful for him being here, like Scott said. It's really interesting because while we've been in Utah, we've known him for so long. He's traveled the world.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. And as a child, one reason is because his father was employed by the church in the building program. And so on assignments, they moved to various parts of the world. He spent 4 years of his childhood in Australia and New Zealand. And at the age of 12,
But before this, right then, he came back to Utah for a little time, and we were best friends. And
true.
Just to show you evidence, because, this is the pen that he sent me from Uruguay when he left as we start our 6th grade year, and I have it in my treasures. And I do need to say, he was an amazing friend that loved the gospel, even then at 12, and gave me a chance to find a kindred spirit that we could really share things we cared about. So anyway, go on.
Yes.
Then he went to Uruguay.
Yes, he did.
Where he actually graduated from high school there.
Mm-hmm. And then he served a mission in Guatemala, El Salvador, and then he went to BYU, and his life changed forever. Not only because he decided to go into what his love was, and he
television production and got a degree in that.
Advertising and public relations. It was there that he met his wife, Nancy. And I just love this part of the story.
Because he was in Young Ambassadors performing, so maybe he'll sing for us today.
Yeah. And then they toured with the Lamanite generation, and she was a ventriloquist, and he played the, let's see, what kind of harp?
Uruguayan harp.
And it was such a unique talent that they got to tour together. And, from then on, it was just romance, right?
That's right. Yes.
And for me, it was love at first sight. And for Nancy, it was hate at first sight. So
I relate to that.
No. So these two, they've had quite the life together. And they are actually parents of 6 children. And all those kids have gone on a mission. And they now have 32 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren. That is amazing.
Amazing for such a young man.
Yes.
That's why I look so old.
He served as a bishop twice and in a stake presidency and as a stake president and then as a mission president. But prior to that, he was director of media and public programs in the church's missionary department. So that was before. And then
Arizona Tempe Mission.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as he got back, he became the managing director of the missionary department for over 18 years.
And that's what we're talking about today. All the good that he accomplished in that calling.
And the amazing thing is every step in his life was guided by Heavenly Father to prepare him to do what he needed to do so that we could be ready to do what we need to do.
That's right. And it's going to be exciting to hear all those stories. But just to finish up, he, let's see, so concurrent with his service in the church's missionary department, he served from 2011 to 2016 as an Area 70 in the 5th Quorum of 70, assigned to the Utah Salt Lake City area.
And I got to be trained by him during that time and loved every minute of it.
Oh, so some of his credits are...
By the way, right after that, he left and went to Laie.
Yes.
And had a chance to be the director of the visitor center there.
Mm-hmm.
Read those credits.
Yeah, well, let's talk about all those credits as we go along, because some of our very favorite films were either produced or directed by Stephen.
In fact, he has an Emmy.
Yeah.
And None of them were actually produced or directed by me, but I was the executive producer.
Executive
Got you.
producer.
Wait, let's get
That
that
sounds
The
right.
reason I say that is because the directors and the producers really deserve all the credit for those products. And
They were amazing.
I think that I'm overstepping my bounds.
Well, your influence was certainly felt, and it wouldn't have happened without you. So let's talk about, like Scott asked, how did you get involved in this? Were you always interested in film and media?
Well, there's a long version to this story, but I'm going to give you the very, very short version. The short version is that at age 14, we were living in South America, and my father was over all the building program for the church in South America. And on his first trip to Paraguay, he heard the Paraguayan harp being played at a restaurant. We believe he was at dinner that night with Robert E. Wells, who later became a general authority, whose daughter Charlene was Miss America. And I ended up being her talent coach and arranger for her musical number on the Paraguayan harp. So anyway, Dad brought the harp home and said to 12 or 13, however old I was, must have been 12, to 12-year-old Steve, you're going to learn to play this. And I said, over my dead body. And he said, that's however you want it, but you're going to learn to play this. And, I learned to play it very, very well. And when I went to BYU, I auditioned for the program bureau and got in their groups. And all of a sudden, entertainment got in my blood. And before my mission, and then after my mission, I stayed involved with the performing groups like Young Ambassadors, Sounds of Freedom, Lamanite Generation. That's where I ended up meeting Nancy and the Lamanite Generation. And I really, at that point in my life, couldn't figure out what I wanted to study, what I wanted to major in. I had an interest in only two things. I was interested in missionary work, and that wasn't offered as a major at BYU, which seemed odd. And I was interested in entertainment, and that wasn't offered. So I labored for a long time, and we had our, I was a long-time junior, I guess, and we had our third child before I figured out on a Young Ambassadors tour to South America, I figured out that I could combine missionary work and entertainment together through television. And I had heard the prophets talk about television, the fact that the Lord allowed television to be invented to take the gospel to the world. And there's really no other reason. Spencer W. Kimball, when I was 14, I heard him in a mission conference in Uruguay, and he said, why do you think the Lord allowed the airplane to be invented? It's to take his servants around the world. Why do you think he allowed the TV to be invented? It's to take the message around the world, and everything else is a byproduct until we get to the point of using that. So I thought, that's it.
This is it.
Missionary work and entertainment through television. So that's the short version. I can give you a much longer version, but we ended up moving to Los Angeles to get into the network television, become the best we could be. And that was basically a failed 2 years in LA, but I guess it wasn't a failure because we had experiences the Lord wanted us to have. And then I was offered to work for the Public Communications Department at age 28, doing what I hoped I'd be able to do at age 45. And from there on, there we were. And then you have to trust the Lord. And I never saw myself as a trainer. I never saw myself I was a media guy. And over the span of time, the Lord trained me how to train. He trained me to be the lead trainer in the missionary department. He trained me and appointed me as the managing director of the department. And that ran for 18 years. So it was, if you trust the Lord and listen to the Spirit, He'll lead you. He cares about every one of our lives. It's not just mine He's interested in. It's not just President Nelson He's interested in. He cares about the details in your life, every one of you. And he will be involved in it to the extent you let Him. And my experience has been the way you let the Lord be involved in your life is you pray that His will be done and that you'll be able to accept that will, because that's really the only thing we have that we can offer God is ourselves. We can offer Him our will. He won't take it. unless we give it to him. But if we give it to him, then fasten your seatbelt, because he has a way of stretching us. That's a long answer. I'm sorry.
No, that's a perfect
Wonderful.
answer. And I think it exemplifies the idea that you were raised up, as are many others, but in a very special way, and appointed when you're 28 with this background in media and everything in the missionary department to prepare for what we've been through lately,
Yeah.
which is the very need to have media be the way we share the gospel more than ever before, right?
Yes. And, when I reflect back through COVID and all of this, I can't read my book that close. So let me just look here. We started feeling impressed that we should get missionaries into the internet. And the internet came along and it totally changed the world. All of a sudden, young people, instead of watching television, they moved off of television into YouTube. And the reason they did is because television was a 30-minute to a 60-minute format. They didn't want to spend that much time. So they could see what they wanted to on YouTube at 5 to 8 minutes. If you flash forward to today that time keeps getting shorter and shorter. So you've got TikTok that's 3 seconds. And that's where the kids spend their time now. And so when you consider, how do you present a message in 3 seconds? Because that's all you got. And they're gone. And they're on to the next thing. So the Lord inspired us to begin to use technology in the missionary program. I mean, at the beginning of this, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have internet. We didn't have anything. And we were blessed to create Mormon.org. And we were pushing the boundaries, always with the bureaucracy in the church, to begin to use this technology. And I remember being at a lunch with a friend of mine, the head of the ICS department, and at this luncheon at the Little America Hotel in Salt Lake, this idea started to flow into my head that we could create a device. Remember, devices didn't exist at this point. We could create a device that would allow missionaries to be trained and to plan and to be their phone and all of this stuff. And I remember taking a napkin and writing all of this down, talking to him about this. And when I got back to the office, I thought, whoa, this is great. This is so amazing. And so I more carefully improved on my napkin. I'm looking in this book here. See if I can show this to you. And hi. Sorry, I should have thought this through in advance, but
You're great. No worries.
I have a graphic here. I don't know if this graphic's going to show or not.
Oh, yeah.
So over here is, you just have to trust me on this. This was the original drawing of what it could be. And then I moved over to here and made a larger version. And is that centered? Because I can't see it.
Yeah, that looks
Yes,
good.
looks great.
And it envisioned how missionaries would use the device from this end when they got their call all the way through their mission to that end. And it had them doing, everything on this device. And the device, because in the drawing it's shaped like that, somebody said, that looks like an angelfish. So we named it Angelfish because it looked like an angelfish. And that was the beginning of a handheld device. It was an iPad, and we started to roll that out to missions. And we went through just an incredible process of developing the software, but getting this into the hands of missionaries. And this was not necessarily a popular thing. There were a lot of missionaries who did not want to go back to social media. They had fought the battle of getting rid of social media to go on a mission. And the idea of having to have a device that you could now have Facebook on, there was anxiety about this. And then there were mission presidents and their spouses and others who said, well, we can't let the missionaries on the internet because they'll seek out pornography. And this pornography issue became a roadblock of the kind. And I remember, I believe it was 2010, Elder L. Tom Perry was assigned to be the chairman of the Missionary Executive Council. And I was in the conference room in the missionary department with him. Just the two of us were there, which was rare. But he looked at me and he said, Steve, I want you to open up the stake centers and let the missionaries in the stake centers to use those computers to start proselyting on computers in the stake centers. And I'm telling you, only a prophet could have said that. I mean, because if you're an administrator at the church, you immediately see all sorts of roadblocks for doing that. I mean, how are you going to jump through those hoops? And I said, but he said, open it up and set it up. And I said, yes, sir, because that's what you say to a former Marine. Yes, sir. And so we paused, and then I said, may I ask you one question? He said, yes. And I said, are you concerned at all about pornography? And he paused for a long moment. And then he said, no, I'm not concerned about pornography. That's always been there, and it will always be there. We simply have to teach our missionaries to not go there. Now get them in there. So, wow, we had a prophetic charge that not all the prophets knew about or were in favor of. And to the idea of letting them into a ward computer, a clerk's office or a state clerk's office, you can imagine the roadblocks involved there at every level. You're going to let 19-year-olds on our computer? It was 2010, and the Lord was preparing us for 2019.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden in 2019, had we not developed it and tested it and worked it through, we couldn't have, the pandemic, when it hit, put missionaries in their apartments learning how to use technology to spread the gospel. And there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They were forced to do it. Now, if I back up between 2010 and 2019, we started to test this. We started to develop a device. We'd roll this out into missions and we'd test it. And there was some mission presidents who got really scared with this. And I remember one in particular who made a lot of noise saying, look, I've got missionaries accessing pornography. And they talked to their favorite general authority. There was alarm at headquarters. Not everybody was sure that we were doing the right thing. Our chairman at this point is a man named Russell Nelson. Russell Nelson said, listen, we have got to save this next generation of youth. And saving them is one of the reasons why President Monson lowered the age for missionary service from 21 to 19 for sisters and from 19 to 18 for young men, so that they could go earlier, so that they don't fall through that chasm of graduation from high school and have to wait a year or two to go on their mission, where we lost a lot of kids. And he said, there's no better place for them to learn to avoid pornography than in the mission field. So we're not worried about that. We're going to teach them, we're going to train them, and we're going to love them. And to flash forward, when we got to our biggest test, we had 87 missions in the test. And Elder Nelson at the time said, I think we need to call the mission presidents, our test mission presidents, into one of three meetings. We held one in Salt Lake for everybody in the Americas. We held one in Tokyo for the few in Japan that were working on it. And we held one in Frankfurt for the 15 missions in Europe that were on it. And a member of the Missionary Executive Council went to each of those. So we were all at the meeting in Salt Lake. And for a day, we brought them all to Salt Lake. It's not inexpensive to fly these mission presidents in. And for a full day, the brethren gave them the prophetic vision of what we were dealing with and why we needed to do it, and said, you just relax. I was assigned after that to go to Europe with Elder Bednar and Elder Brent Nielsen, and we did the same thing in Europe. And my associate Chris Randall went with Elder David Evans and President Nelson to Tokyo, and they did the same thing. And then Elder Nelson said, and then I want a staff member and a general authority to go to every single one of those 87 missions and hold mission conferences with all the missionaries and introduce this technology to them. We'd put in place some safeguards that they couldn't get or wouldn't themselves in trouble. And we did. I don't remember how many missions I went to, but I went to those meetings, and we called all the missionaries, entire mission conferences together. And I remember being with Elder David Evans, and missionaries were really scared of going back on the internet. And there were missionaries who thought that they were addicted to pornography. And Elder Evans said this in a pretty prophetic manner. He said, listen, elders and sisters, let me tell you this. There's not one of you in this room today who is addicted to pornography. And I was looking at their eyes, and I could see people go, really? Well, he doesn't know. He said, let me tell you how I know that. I know that not only by the Spirit, but I know it because you're here serving as missionaries. And if you were truly addicted, you couldn't serve. It would have you so tied down that you couldn't serve. Now, you need to get the word addicted out of your vocabulary. You may have a problem. Some of you may have a large problem. Some of you may have a small problem, but that doesn't mean you're addicted. Don't let Satan deceive you into believing that you're addicted. If you have a problem, you come visit with your mission president, and he will love you, and he will help you, and he will not send you home. This was news to the mission presidents too. He said, we are going to help you work through this, and you're going to be successful. And that's prophet speaking. That's way before 2019, right? Or 2020 or 2021. Yesterday, I heard on the radio that the next COVID has all of a sudden been discovered. And, read Isaiah. This is with us till the end. This isn't going to get, it's not my place to prophesy about that, but I think that we just trust the Lord and do our best. But he is in charge. And this is his church. Don't forget it.
Stephen, you have shared with us such an inspiring glimpse of something no one else could really give us at this point, to see God's hand. Talk about sending his beautiful love around the world and preparing all of this way ahead of time, just as he's prepared you. What an inspiration. What an amazing blessing.
And to see how your life has unfolded, the experiences that you've had, it's just so interesting to me. In preparing for this today, I watched some of the Homefront videos that we just love. Julie Through the Glass, and the family that takes their dad by surprise and puts him in the camper to go camping because he said he was too busy. Just all those ones that we, had around in the 80s. And they're still so applicable. And then to see where that has brought us now, and the recent media that has been present, it's such, like you said, it's the way that the Lord has prepared to share the gospel worldwide. So what have you seen what experiences maybe could you share about times that you have seen your work influence groups and people, individuals? What have you seen?
And maybe since we're in the shadows of General Conference coming, you had a lot to do with some experiences there that might prepare people to be ready to hear more completely what's said. Anyway, what would you like to talk about?
Well, I had the unique blessing to sit at the feet of the prophets. And I knew every one of them on a first name basis, my first name, not theirs, except for President Monson. in my almost 40-year career, I was with President Monson in a one-on-one meeting one time. And, I was with a member of the 12 every day of my career almost. I mean, at least 3 or 4 times a week. So what I learned very quickly is that these are prophets, seers, and revelators, and they are men. And they have all the challenges and difficulties that we face as people. And yet they rise to the occasion, and they're prophets. And there are times when they speak as an individual, and they'll voice opinions in their quorum meetings. I've sat in some of those meetings and listened to them, and they are not shy to share opinions from A to Z, back and forth. But once the quorum works through all that, they've heard everybody's opinion, the Lord has a way of unifying them, and they do not move on anything until they're united. And history of the church would tell you that some of those times it's taken years for them to get united behind something. I think that even all the things that President Nelson has taught us in the last 4 years, much of that was developed long before President Nelson came along in the councils of the church, getting ready for that time. And when the right prophet comes along that's interested in a certain thing and the Lord wants to move something, that's how he does it. I had the assignment as a 28-year-old to sit behind the First Presidency in General Conference and prompt them for the broadcast. Conference was one of our responsibilities. And I'll just say this, that seat was called the hot seat. It was in the tabernacle. The organ was right here. I could set my arm on the organ bench, and if the organist passed out, I could slide onto the organ and pretend I knew what I was doing. And right here in front of me were the heads of the 3 members of the 12, or the members of the First Presidency. And in those days, conference was carried live, and our agency Bonneville negotiated with stations all across the country to carry it live. But the stations had to have times when they could carry commercials. And so, for example, on Saturday morning at 10:58 and 27 seconds, 10:58, 27 seconds, we had to leave the broadcast so they could insert commercials till the top of the hour. And so the brethren wanted to make sure that we were never cutting away from a talk. And the reason the person was there in the hot seat was because if somebody went long or short, or something happened in the broadcast that made it look like we'd be in the middle of a talk, then we had to fix that. And so I had an earpiece in my ear listening to the booth, and they were just experts at timing every single talk, and they'd see how fast a person was working through his talk line by line, and they could project within seconds when it was going to end. And then with maybe 3 seconds before, they'd tell me what they wanted to do. Well, let's cut 2 verses out of that song. Well, the First Presidency doesn't need to know that, but the choir is told we'll only sing 2 verses. But if we're going to cut a song, my job, I had their conducting page right in front of me. My job was to take a red marker and mark out what the song was and change what they were going to say on that page. And then I'd get down on my hands and knees and crawl around the corner red chair and hand it to the member of the First Presidency who was in that seat. And, and they sat in order of who was conducting in those days. So the farthest seat over was the person conducting, and then the 2 counselors. So I'd hand it to that counselor, and the booth is in my ear saying, "Did they get it? Did they get it?" They're pressuring, but no, nobody can hear this except for me. And I'm not trying to upset the First Presidency, so I'd hand it to President Tanner, and President Tanner would take it, look at it, and I'm hearing a countdown in my ears, and then he agrees with it, so he'd give it to President Romney, who would take it and read it, and then he'd give it to President Kimball, who's conducting, and President Kimball would look at it, and smile at me, and then he'd get up and read what I had just given him to read. Well, that was called the hot
My
seat.
goodness.
That's high
Well,
pressure.
And there's a lot of stories with that, but one of my favorite ones was a hot afternoon session. I don't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday, and I went around the edge with this change, and President Tatter was asleep. So I couldn't give it to him. So I reached over to President Romney. President Romney's asleep. And I thought, oh, and then President Kimball looked over at me, and he looked at them, and he smiled and reached out his hand and took it. Just funny stuff. In those days, I'll give you just one other one, and then I know our time's up. But LeGrand Richards, LeGrand Richards was famous for interacting with the audience, and he had such a way of speaking, and he'd always say, well, they're giving me their red light now, but just one more story. Well, I'm the guy who gave the red light or the yellow light. I had to call for that light to be given on the pulpit. And I can tell you that LeGrand Richards at this point of his life was blind. He couldn't even see a light. If we put a light on, we had a light on the pulpit, he couldn't see that. So he was down there talking, but he had a sense of how long he was to talk for. And he'd say, well, they're giving me the red light, but one more story. He never, ever went over time, ever. He never, ever went over time. He went under time. And one of my favorite scenes that I remember watching was when he got up to give his talk in one of the conferences, he handed his cane to President Benson, who I guess was president of the Quorum of the 12 at that time. And he must have said, tap me on the leg when my time's up. So as luck would have it, as he's coming towards the end of his time, the balcony camera shot was a wide shot that clearly showed President Benson leaning forward with the cane and going, whack! In the leg.
Oh, dear.
The audience wouldn't know what was going on, but there were a lot of interesting moments there. So I did that for I don't know if I did that for 2 conferences or 3 conferences. And then we hired someone, and I passed that off very quickly. It was shortly after that, to show you how the Lord works, that he inspired some of my associates to suggest that maybe we should have satellite dishes in state centers. Then we wouldn't have to do commercial television for General Conference. And that's when the first satellite dishes were approved to be put in state centers, which, and of course the internet hadn't been invented. So the only way you were getting conference was either commercial television or your satellite dish. And they put satellite dishes across the whole church. For years, that's how all the messages went down until we get the internet.
Amazing.
It is incredible.
President Kimball said, the Lord has in mind inventions which we laymen can hardly catch a glimpse of. Who'd have ever dreamt of the internet?
Yeah.
What's he got in mind now? What's going to surface in 5 years that we're going to say, oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh,
We just noticed that they're
exciting.
using artificial intelligence to do indexing now, and 80% of the indexing can be done by intelligence, and now the humans can just look at it and make sure it's right. Talk about an advancement that's going to move forward the work on the other side of the veil. It's just exciting. But
when I'm on the internet, I feel like it is an artificial intelligence that I'm trying to use.
Me too. So anything you'd like to share with us in closing? You've had such a rich, wonderful, you've sat at the feet of the brethren forever and been one of them. And in the midst of all that training you've received, you used to do that at General Conference. Whatever you'd like to share in closing would be great.
Well, I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. I have been called of him to declare his word among his people that they might have everlasting life. And my witness is that Jesus Christ is indeed the Savior of the world, the only begotten Son of the Father. And he is the great Jehovah of the Old Testament. and the Messiah of the new, and he lives. And I can tell you from personal experience that he is intimately involved in this work. And he wants to be involved in our lives to the extent that we'll allow him in by listening to and following the promptings of the Holy Ghost. He really, really wants to be involved. He's commanded us to pray often. It's just not an invitation. It's a commandment to pray often. And he warns us when he tells us that to write down and record what he tells us to do and pay attention to it. And to the extent we do that, we will be safe and guided by him. And so I witness that the gospel is restored on the earth, that Russell Nelson is a prophet of God, and so are the other 14 brethren who work with him. And that's my witness in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. And thank you for being an instrument in his hands all these years.
And please, all of you, our friends, share this so that this wonderful spirit can reach across the globe. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.